Hello, and welcome to this BizTalks Roundtable on smart investments for the intelligent future of business. I'm Shelley Kramer. You probably know me. And I'm here today with a group of fantastically intelligent friends. I'm joined by Kevin Jackson, the CEO of GC GlobalNet, Helen Yu, the founder and CEO of Tegon Advisory Corp, and Jason Inskeep, the director of 5G Center of Intelligence at AT&T. This BizTalks Roundtable is going to focus on the fact that technology is getting smarter, from traffic routing networks to autonomous vehicles to connected everything. The future of business, as we know, will be automated, intelligent, and connected. And therein lies the challenge for business leaders. Business leaders need to make smart investments in the right emerging and existing technologies in order to survive and in order to have a competitive advantage in 2021 and beyond. So we're here today on behalf of AT&T Business with a little fireside chat about how business leaders can guide their tech investments for the coming year and beyond. So without further ado, hello guests. Hello, Kevin. Hello, Helen. Hello, Jason. It's great to have
Hey,
you.
Hi, Shelley.
hey, Shelley.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure to hang out with you three. So today we're going to talk about kind of the essential tech investments that business leaders should think about making in the next year, how to make long-term plans around investing in technology, and what processes and skills business leaders need to think about as they're thinking about how they can make use of their technology investments. So let's get to some questions. And I'm going to say right off, and all of you know this, we've been friends for a long time. We've hung out together before. There are absolutely no wrong answers. And to our audience here, also know there are no silly questions. So if you have a question, please be sure and pop it into the conversation here, and we'll tackle that a little bit later on in our discussion. So first off, I want to talk a little bit about what the general mood is on behalf of business leaders right now. And I know that that's really sort of a broad group, but how are people feeling? And are people optimistic about the future? We're coming into the year end. What's the general attitude? I'll start real quickly and say that, I feel like in our clients are mostly in the technology space. And, I think that people had started out regrouping and refocusing and kind of rethinking how business was done. And or at least we morphed into that. And when we first started experiencing pandemic times, I think that business leaders jumped into crisis mode, and we had to get people working from home. We had to get customers being served from home. We had to make solutions that sometimes weren't the best solutions, but they were the solutions that were right at the time. And then what I've seen happen with our clients is, again, this strategic move to rethink and to refocus and to kind of rethink everything. As we move into the latter part of this year and as we move into next year. So Helen, what do you think? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I echo what you just said, Shelley. The pandemic is really an epic test of character and leadership. Most of us really have shifted from feeling powerless, unprepared, to seize the moment to adapt, stay ahead, and emerge stronger. On a personal level, I really miss the face-to-face interactions with friends and family members. However, I'm thankful for having the technology that enables us to see family and friends over video calls, regardless of where we are. I'm personally cautiously optimistic about the year ahead. I do think that I have realized this is not the year to get what I wanted. It is a year to reassess what I really need and appreciate what I have.
Right. Absolutely. I think that, I saw something earlier this morning, kind of a reflection on that, not from a business standpoint, but from a personal standpoint. Like, this may not be the year that you get everything you want, but it's definitely the year to be grateful for what you've got, right?
Absolutely.
So Kevin, what about you?
Yeah, so, I think the shock is kind of over, and leaders have realized that the old way is never coming back.
Right.
This cliche it became was like, when do we get back to normal? Well, there is no going back to normal. The remote
Right.
and virtual life is here to stay, and the only way forward is to really accept it and update your your processes to better take advantage of all the new technologies you were forced to buy so that you could talk and work with your employees and interact with your customers and business partners. I mean, move forward and expect the future to be what it is now.
Absolutely. You said it. You know, we were talking before we went live with this show about sending our children off to school or giving them, you know, the death warnings if they interrupted us. And I think that, you know, speaking of things that aren't ever going back the way they were, I have freshmen, twin daughters who are freshmen in high school. And I said, you know, you realize y'all are so good at virtual school. You're never getting a snow day again. I mean, it's history. And they're so sad thinking about that. But that's a good thing, being able to pivot and transition well. And so talking about technology and how technology is really driving all of our lives right now from both a personal and a professional standpoint, let's talk about what the no-brainer tech investment for business leaders is in Q1 of 2021. The, you know, if you don't have this, you really need it. And Jason, that's all you.
Yeah, great. You know, so funny story. Let's just echo what you were just talking about, right? With working from home and everybody being here. We were having our conversation earlier this week, and yeah, it's right when all the kids had got home from school. So what are the first thing they do? Jump on homework, jump on, you know, whatever streaming thing they can do. And yeah, we suffered kind of have a conversation. So, you know, one of the things, you know, again, kind of dovetailing back to the prior question, yeah, we've adapted, cautiously optimistic. I think some things we can actually do, you know, kind of quickly and maybe help that mitigate that challenge I had earlier this week. Luckily, I know somebody that works in a network company, so that was helpful. But you know, help our employees with some troubleshooting methodologies, right? What are things you can do to optimize your home network? What are some things you can do ahead of time? Obviously, this pushed me to go ahead and call that network guy I know and kind of help put this thing together a little bit better than what it was before. But I know there's other things we can do from a just configuration perspective. At the same time, I think coming out of that, we may have some other technologies. If you think about, you know, a home version of SD-WAN with, you know, dual connections and things like that. What does that look like, right? Which may be able to add some more security, some better routing, and again, optimize that network at home. So that's really one area I think we can look at both from a process and a technology perspective. Second, when I think about just raw technology, that's really becoming very interesting, you know, popped up a lot prior to this, but is video as a sensor, right? It's coming up everywhere. I mean, in terms of manufacturing, in terms of any industrial climate, return to work, we're seeing people use that thermal for temperature setting,
Right.
and it's just continuing to rise. And as the networks have continued to get better and stronger, it's giving customers more options, right? 5G is driving that, the edge is driving that, letting them rethink how they can use it. And it really becomes less of a cost in dollars, but in terms of cost and capacity, right? How do I manage this solution better as I think about the changes that are going to be in the environment, safer work environment, keep the distance, keep people separated. Those sort of things aren't going away. As we said, it's the new normal, but those types of technologies can not only drive ROI in normal ways, but also new ways we haven't thought about. So video is a big one I would think about. So again, the two I would say is how to optimize the home network, help out there. And then two, video as a sensor, super portable, very horizontal solution for a myriad of industries.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting. And I think that, you know, my team and I we've worked virtually for decades, so we're experts at it. But for so many people out there, getting the opportunity to go back into the physical workforce is important. It's important for their own sort of mental health and well-being. It's important just for, you know, them being able to get their work done. And so solutions that bring safety, like video as a sensor, I think is a big deal. And I think it's really top of list for a lot of organizations that we talk with. Helen, what do you think?
I think business leaders really have to make cybersecurity a top priority. If you have really pay attention to the FBI IC3 report, right? They reported cyber complaints have increased from 1,000 to 4,000 daily. That what that means, right? It means a lot. You know, the vulnerability is really there. It's in the day-to-day life, and then so making the remote worker, making sure they have the VPN to access the sensitive information data is a must-have. In terms of investments throughout the year, infrastructure and cloud are really important tech investment. There are a lot of IT leaders actively considering distributed cloud nowadays.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I just sort of to tail on to that, the cloud services and applications and the fact that everyone is remote, the biggest issue, I believe, is authentication and access management capabilities. Information and data from your organization is going everywhere. And how do you know that the right person is using it, or that someone who was using it last week is still using it this week when they shouldn't? So data loss protection technologies and data rights management capabilities are crucial to any organization. You are really operating in a global environment, no matter if you're communicating with someone in the next room.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important. So, what indicators do you think we should be keeping an eye on throughout the next year to help guide investments in the years to come? And I'm going to start off by saying that we just finished up a research study for a client that hasn't yet published, but it's going to go live this week. And one of the things that we looked at, we do a lot, of course, all of us in the digital transformation space. But in this particular research study, this client wanted to look at, instead of only surveying senior leaders and executives, they wanted to talk to and to get input from frontline workers, mid-level workers about digital transformation within their companies and how they felt their company was handling digital transformation initiatives and how involved they were or were not in those initiatives. And so what we found was that employees really want to be involved in corporate digital transformation initiatives. They have knowledge, skills, and information that can help. But when they're not tapped to be a part of those initiatives, they very much feel left out, and there's some contributions that could be being made that aren't happening. And so I thought that was a really interesting look and at digital transformation as a whole. And so I would say that one of the things that I think companies need to keep a barometer on is remembering that digital transformation doesn't just happen in the C-suite. It doesn't just happen in IT. It happens across the organization. And part of successful digital transformation initiatives are actually when you have adoption and use throughout the enterprise, or throughout the size of any organization. It doesn't have to just be an enterprise. So I think that, to me, that's an indicator that companies should take a look at and keep their finger on the pulse of, how are we involving our people in digital transformation? And also, how are we assessing our talent? How are we upskilling our employees? What initiatives do we have in place to help employees learn more and upskill and to teach others within the organization and that sort of thing? Helen, you talked about infrastructure and distributed infrastructure and how important that is. And I think we're seeing companies really taking a hard look at their infrastructure and their needs and making assessments there in terms of opting perhaps for infrastructure as a service solutions or things like that. So I think that's interesting. What else? What else are you thinking about in terms of what companies should keep an eye on? Helen?
Yeah, I would add the well-being of employees, right? If you think about 8 in 10 IT leaders these days are concerned about the mental health of their team. So we really need to have the programs in place to support our employees, ensure their well-being, they're really maintain the well-being. And then you mentioned about upscaling workforce. And to me, that's not just about training. It also means that seeking emotional engagement, right? Creating the connected workforce, even though when they're remote, but they, find opportunities for them to connect with each other, helping each other and supporting each other. Those are the things that would be a good indicator for us to measure the success of of businesses. The other thing is brand reputation is another good indicator for business to invest, right? That's part of the intangible value of a company.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was also noticing in the news this week that has been an explosion of sort of well-being focus and apps and technology in the workplace because companies are realizing that employees are stressed. Many of us working from home report that, we're working more than ever before when you factor out a commute, when you factor out
Hmm.
lunches with colleagues or anything like that, we're just working. And so mental health, I think you make a really valid point, is incredibly important, Helen, in moving forward. What do you think, Kevin?
Well, one of the things we saw at the very beginning of the pandemic was a huge retrenchment from globalization. All of the manufacturing was overseas, speaking from the United States point of view, and the supply chains broke. So all the companies were trying to figure out how to onshore everything. So right now all the industries are trying to figure out the sweet spot between globalization and reshoring everything. But no matter the decision, reliable wide area data connectivity is going to be essential. And that means even more rapid deployment of 5G services and solutions. I'm really looking at the industry vertical solutions, these being fielded by all the leading communication service providers like AT&T. These will help companies and organizations find and leverage that sweet spot. What needs to be globally, what needs to be locally.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly valid point. So let's talk about now. I think you've set the stage perfectly. We know that nothing is foolproof, right? And I think that this has been a great humanizing moment for us in the world of business. And when I talk about that, one of the things that, again, we talked about early on in this conversation, we sent our kids away. I know that all of you are on video chats all day long, whether it's internal or external, and, somebody's baby cries or somebody's dog barks or somebody's lawn service shows up or whatever. And it's like, we have become human to one another in ways that we really weren't before. We kind of kept I know I kept my personal life pretty hidden. And so we've humanized ourselves, we've humanized our companies, and we make mistakes along the way. And we know that nothing is ever foolproof. But let's talk a little bit about how leaders can think about making their businesses more fool resistant in 2021. Jason, I think that's right up your alley.
Yeah, enable the employees, right? We got
Yeah,
to get their homes augmented the way it needs to be comfortable so that when we are working those days with no lunch and kids running around, at least that's one less frustration we've got to worry about.
right.
And I think another opportunity that comes with this that we've got to figure out is, as Kevin pointed out, we've got industry verticals that are starting to look at new things in 2021. How do we collaborate with them in the same way, right? 5G is basically a user-defined type of environment, and a lot of the gains that we've made and learned about in the last 3 to 5 years have come from direct customer interactions, right? Whether it's sitting on their site, walking through their facility, and now that's taken away. So that's a big adjustment. And to your point, the better my environment is to have that interaction and collaboration, we can still get to those gains that we were making and strides we were making as an industry. But there's still a lot of education that's got to happen. And I think that starts with not being frustrated with the things you're using at home, most certainly.
Yeah, it's kind of like getting in your car, you just want to get in your car and turn a key. Although, does anybody turn a key anymore? I don't know. I just push a button. But you know how you just want it to work. And that's how we are about our work environment, whether we're at home or whether we're in a corporate office or whatever. It's just so creating environments where things just work and people don't have to think about it and don't have to stress about it. I think that's a really key thing, Jason. I think that digital transformation, I've heard this phrase so many times, I hate to even say it, but what we've experienced in the last 800 months is, digital transformation, that would normally take the span of a couple of years happening in, a blink of an eye. And that's good
Yeah.
and terrible. I think that's the good thing is that it's forced companies to embrace things that might have been on the to-do list, but they weren't quite yet ready to do. And that causes, that's stressful. It causes a reshuffling of budget items and finances and tech allocations and things like that. But, really, and I know that this is, the gospel that you preach, all of you, as well, is that, customer experience is the holy grail of everything. And so, one thing that we have to make sure of is that our employees have a great experience, but also being able to enable and empower those employees to deliver a fantastic customer experience is kind of what it's all about too, Let's talk a little bit about emerging technology. One of you, Kevin, you want to talk a little bit about this and what you see ahead?
Well, actually, as I said before, this virtual world is not going away. And a lot of the tools that are emerging are being created to make that virtual world secure and safe. Things like blockchain. I mean, everybody has heard of Bitcoin, and I guess, it's hitting its highest points here recently. But that's blockchain applied to just the financial industry. Blockchain has value in protecting information. Blockchain has value in protecting supply chains. So that is a critical emerging technology,
Right.
as well as the hybrid cloud. All of the organizations are leveraging multiple cloud service providers, and managed security services are becoming critical. Earlier, I talked about having things like digital rights management and DLP. Well, you also need things like a access service management or managed security services. I think these are important to all businesses.
Blockchain, my colleagues here at Futurum and I tackled the topic of the vaccines that are coming down the pike and the vaccine administration. And blockchain was really high on our list in terms of an emerging technology that, we perhaps don't think about enough and don't talk about enough. But when you're talking about managing privacy and personally identifiable information, I can say that. I know I can. That kind of technology has so many applications, not only as it relates to vaccines, but, really just in protecting information and security. So let's talk a little bit about what businesses should maybe stop thinking about doing in 2021. Where are they putting money and time and effort that perhaps might not be giving the ROI that they think? Helen, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. There are a couple things the business should really stop doing, right? Number one is stop creating a false image of your culture and brand. They really need to focus on fundamentals to create a diverse culture. I mentioned earlier about the intangible things, right? Intangible things today really contributed to $21 trillion of value for all the S&P 500 companies. That's 90% of the value. So that consists of the IP, the brand reputation, all those things, and then the data security, and then also customer experience, employee retention. Secondly is business really stop investing in technology. I wouldn't say stop investing. I would say they need to start understanding what business issue, pain point they're trying to solve before jump into technology investment. The three questions I would say they should ask: number one, what is the positive business outcome you're trying to drive or achieve? And in order to achieve that, what capability you really need to reach that outcome, and how you measure that success. And then you can invest other than 5G, other than the remote access, VPN, everything else. When you invest, right, if you jump into emerging technology, you should really nail down the business outcome and then use case of that before you jump into the investment.
Well, and I will
Yeah.
add to that real quickly that I think that part of your strategy has to include how do we achieve adoption throughout the organization? Because time and time again, we've seen businesses invest in technology. Someone made a decision, we need this, and we spent a whole lot of money on it, and yet maybe we didn't involve others throughout the organization who might actually be using this technology and get their feedback and that sort of thing. So I really think that part of your strategic initiative needs to include, how do we scale this? How do we get adoption throughout the organization? I think that's pretty important. Kevin?
Yeah, one point to add on that is stop forgetting about formal training and education.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, that's the first thing that gets cut out of the budget so we can buy that, thing with blinky lights. Okay, that's a big mistake because companies need employees that can work independently and efficiently. In order to do that, they need to be truly competent in their skills and confident in themselves.
Right.
Okay, and a continuous learning environment that values formal training and education really builds that type of culture in your organization.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's super important. And people don't really, training cannot be successful if it's handled in a one and done manner. Continuous learning is so important. Being able to serve up training in bits and pieces whenever and wherever they need it, and training that's engaging and interesting and that sort of thing. I mean, that really is the key. Really, really important point, Kevin, I think that you made. Jason, you had
Yeah.
something to add.
Yeah, I would add, we've come to a world that is software enabled. And good news of software is we can do almost anything we want. And the bad news of software is we can almost do anything we want, right? And there's been the old adage and, fail fast, right? So we talked about technology fail fast. And typically technology fail fast is easy. It either works or it doesn't, right? And oftentimes we get so enamored with that we forget what is the business case on the other side of the business fail fast, right? So encouraging customers as they're looking at, again, with all the new technologies, blinking lights, 5G, edge, these different topics that are popping up more and more and more, not just look at it from a technical fail fast perspective, but also an operational and business fail fast perspective, which means I've got to bring the customer into that discussion, right?
Right.
Let them help you build it, because, it's really trying to find Goldilocks. What's the optimal solution on the other end? And if you don't have the user involved, it's going to be very difficult to get there. And, typically you've had dev shops on one side, really far removed from the user. And it's hard to get that balance, right? So having that person involved, or having someone closer to the customer involved, hopefully gets us to that right solution faster, which is ultimately what is going to drive the ROI that our customers and obviously everyone's looking for from an experience perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And the Goldilocks analogy was good, because not everyone likes a bed that's the same firmness, right? So you have to really respect the fact that your customers are different and they have, nuances involved, and it's not just a, one size fits all solution. And I think that's probably really important. Kevin, did you want to add?
Yeah, I want to add that don't be afraid of quote failure. Your
Yeah.
failure is not bad. Failure is good. You learn from
Yeah.
figure out what doesn't work. So
Right.
stop procrastinating on digitalization. Really adopt the virtual tools, the virtual solutions. Try them. They may
Yeah.
work on one customer set or not work on another customer set. They'll work on this environment or this situation and not in this scenario. But businesses need to embrace things like everyone is not the same, right? So
Right.
you need you need omni-channel. You need
Right.
the SD-WAN so that you can change to match the customers or the users' preferences. Connectivity and the virtual business models really enable you to better reach and connect with your suppliers and customers. And that's how you differentiate yourself in the marketplace.
I think that you make such a valid point, and I'll make an analogy here. Before some of us, before pre-pandemic, a million
Mhm.
years ago, some of us were used to regularly collaborating by way of video chats, but a whole bunch of us were not. Okay. So when you think back to the beginning days of the pandemic and you'd have a conversation with your customers or with your team or whatever, and, there were always those people who never turned their camera on. And
Yeah.
and what I taught my team years ago, because again, we've been doing this virtually for decades, but what I taught my team years ago is that we need to look each other in the eyes. We need to see, I don't care what you look like. I don't, but we need to show up. We don't physically go to an office. This is our office. And so what I've seen happening over the course of the last number of months is that people have become very much more comfortable. And there's some people that are always going to hate video collaboration. But the reality of it is, this is our reality. Turn the camera on. It's all good.
Right.
Look people in the eyes, show up, shake hands. This is what we're doing. And so it's that easy. When you think about being afraid to try, it's kind of like video. Don't be afraid to turn your camera on. Well, don't be afraid to do these other digitization things, because soon you will find they become as much a part of your life as anything else. And it really wasn't as much of a hurdle or as scary or as expensive sometimes as you might have thought that it was.
I have to share a personal story with you, right? I'm going through digital transformation myself at home. Remember those days you used to take pictures, you have to develop them. So I had tens of and 20s of albums, and then so I decided to buy a scanner, right? We scanned every single one of them. My friend asked me, why did you buy no one use those scanner anymore? But I scanned all the old pictures. I started sending them, instead of sending the Christmas card and sending them the old pictures, I made the card made of the old pictures we used to take together with friends. They loved it, right? As part of going through the transition, it's very time consuming, but it was worth the effort. Really love doing that. And then I'm also digitalizing all the documents that you'd have the text documents 7 years ago. Now I'm like scanning all the documents and I'm throwing out, threaded all the papers. So it's actually empty. My whole office, half the office is empty now. I feel so good after going through the process.
But it's unfortunate though that some of those problems, even when you digitize, come with you. So instead of having boxes and boxes of pictures in the storage room, you now have files, electronic files and files of pictures that you don't know what they are, and there's no way to search them because there's no key.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, change, human beings are not necessarily wired for change. I've always been very grateful. And truly, my secret to career success has been that for some odd reason, I function amazingly well in a high state of chaos, and I love change. And so, what the current situation is forcing us to embrace change and to be open-minded and to go out on a limb and do things that, you may be a little scared of, or, you're not sure how it's going to work out, and, everybody's watching or whatever, but it'll all work out. So Jason, go ahead.
The thing about this digitalization is that it is your job now. Yeah. I mean, if you are a professional, you need to turn on the camera and be seen. Yep. If you are a professional, you need to be on social networks like LinkedIn to be seen, to interact. So this digital interaction shouldn't be seen as something extra or something that I have a choice to do. It's part of your job in the professional world.
Well, and I think that also you make such a valid point, because for those of us, present company included, and probably people who are hanging out with us on LinkedIn or on Twitter, a lot of us planted a flag in digitization a long time ago. And we started building social networks and making friends all over the world and creating relationships and partnerships and everything else. And we were comfortable walking on a stage as we are turning on a camera. And so, we embraced change and we knew that the world was changing. And what I think we're seeing, certainly since, the days of the pandemic, is that people and companies who hadn't done that and who hadn't realized the power of social, the power of video, and all of the things, the technology that drives that are having a, oh my gosh moment and really running to catch up. And it's hard to, when people look at us, and say, oh my gosh, how did you, amass this gigantic network? Well, I spent a decade building it, and so some of these things are things that are hard to turn a switch on and just make happen overnight. But you know what? Today is the best day to start when it comes to making changes and embracing digital transformation and all that sort of thing. So I want to talk now in the latter part of our show. I want to talk a little bit about what kind of skills that businesses need to be thinking about, looking for, and hiring for in 2021. And Jason, I think this one is right up your alley.
Yeah, and I think the cop-out answer, if I was to go right with what my title has, would be go learn about 5G, right? But that's a broad topic, right? So, I try to maybe parse that down a little bit. Obviously having tons of conversations with customers on digital transformation. How does 5G affect it? And, everybody's got a 5G story, which is a good thing, right? So it's shown how the network is broadened. It's shown how the network has become ability to be converged and, user defined and all the fun things that we want to get to the experiences that we need. However, if you try to go take all that in one big bite, you're going to have a struggle, right? So what I've kind of been championing a little bit with customers as we're kind of going through this process is forget the G, right? Throw the G out the window and start over back at Cellular 101. There's just inherent changes and inherent security pieces that are built into it that, you just need to understand at the core level first, right? Because most of our environments, if shame on us as operators, right? If you flash back prior to, 5G and LTE, et cetera, we didn't really talk too much about those inherent capabilities. We knew they were there, but we didn't really talk about them in detail because the customer kind of had what we gave you, right?
Right.
Now, as that construct has changed and there's more opportunity, you got to get grounded, right? So again, the change, right? Go back and ground yourself on what was before, which again, a lot of the things we talk about with security and 5G, interface encryption, those kind of things, they're already there, right? You ground there, and then you can start to look at now what's the delta, right? So I didn't have quality of service and per se in LTE, but now I've got network slicing. Okay, what is that difference and what does that mean? All right, you've got things like spectrum, shared spectrum versus licensed spectrum versus unlicensed spectrum. And what does that mean, right? So notice I never said G in any of that because inside of that whole construct are the standards bodies. And just because it's in the standards bodies doesn't mean it's necessarily in the production view. But those opportunities are there now in the new world because of opportunities in private cellular networks, right? And those kind of things. So it's kind of grounding on those elements that are just inherent and then starting to build on top of it in context of the business. At the same time, there's a whole nother piece of this. And, you think about 5G really is going to take off because of the end-to-end nature, because of the converged nature, and obviously that brings the edge into the conversation. So you're kind of grounding on that at the same time. And what is that intersection between 5G and edge or cellular and edge, right? And those two pieces are a convergence that aren't that far away in terms of true integrated, I'm holding each other's hands convergence, right? And as those begin to take shape, if you don't have the grounding, it's going to be really hard to go to that next level of that fail fast methodology we were talking about before. So again, from my perspective, and then when I think about who I'm going and looking for, when I'm looking to build out and increase the team or, scale our model is, who are the translators? Who are those unicorns that can talk across the network from cellular network to the cloud network? Because those are the ways that our experiences are going to get better with all the new tech that's on the rise. So again, that grounding, that understanding of end-to-end is really going to be telling to really reach those experiences that we're trying to get to.
Yeah, I like that. Important. Helen, I know you have some thoughts on this topic in terms of what kind of skills, and it's funny, our brains think alike on many topics because what you're going to say is exactly at the top of my list, I think, of skills that we need to be looking for in 2021. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the number one, I think, is the cybersecurity skill set. That's 35% of the company really are in need of, or their lack of cybersecurity skill set. In addition, it is the organizational change management. I think Jason touched upon this. It's not just about technology, right? If you want to adopt the technology, you have to make sure you enable your workforce, making sure they understand, how that technology change would have impact on their day-to-day job, and then how do you enable them to upscale, right? To rescale, upscale, so they learn about the new technology, and then they feel secure, they feel safe about having a job, but shifting their day-to-day responsibility or day-to-day routines. And then the other one is enterprise architecture. And with the rise of IoT and cloud, you have to make sure you have people who are able to help you architect and maintain those new technologies. And then also advanced analytics, right? Once you have all the technologies, how are you going to monitor to ensure the progress you make, and how are you going to measure the success, and then making sure you automate the capability to measure the success of the technology adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that people have any idea of the tremendous need for cybersecurity skilled workers in the workplace. I mean, there's such a huge skills gap there. And I will tell you that I preach, again, I mentioned I have 14-year-old twin daughters, and they're so sick of hearing me say, forget med school. Forget it. Really, even doctors' lives are going to change. Really think about cybersecurity and all of that has to offer and everything else. But I think that you make some really valid points, and change management is incredibly important as well. I had a conversation with a client in the last few months, and one of the stories that they shared that was really interesting was, we know a lot about low code, no code, and, how being able to build bots within an organization and automate processes in the back of the house and the front of the house is really important, and leads to all different kinds of, efficiencies and productivities and everything else. But what happens within an organization when you reskill, when you upskill, and you take somebody who has an ordinary, average, and probably kind of boring job, and you teach them to do something that it never occurred to them that they would have the ability to do. And then they become this citizen developer, and they have this ability to teach other people within the organization how to do these really cool things that they never realized they'd be able to do. And they're so grateful for the opportunity. And when you hear the stories of those individuals, and sometimes those individuals are people who've been worried that technology was going to come and take their position away. But when you hear those stories, they're so uplifting, and people just love to be able to grow and thrive within an organization, within their role in an organization. So I think when it comes to skills, we have to look at who we need to hire, but also identify those unicorns within our organization who may be, ordinary people doing incredibly ordinary jobs, but who have the ability to do so much more. And I think as leaders, it's incumbent upon us to be able to find and identify and give those people kind of the skills that will change everything about our companies and about their jobs and their lives as well.
So. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I wanted to highlight, though, is that change is here to stay, and you need to hire staff and employees that can embrace change. And as you said, Shelley, the perceived chaos, because that's what drives innovation, which in the end is good for us all.
Speaking of innovation, I do want to touch on, we talk about 5G all the time, and all of us are very much immersed in that space. But for other people, sometimes they're not as immersed in it. You hear about it and you hear about, 5G on our phones and it's going to change everything. And you're like, yeah, whatever. Jason, talk with us a little bit about, more about 5G. It's so much more than just faster speeds. Where is 5G going to take businesses in 2021?
So you're right. Speeds are table stakes. I usually have three kind of tenets that I've kind of created on top of this. Of course, I could lay out the buzzwords, but I broke it down into 3 tenets, right? And the first one, as we kind of hinted at, it's more than just speeds. And the two other areas that are really key coming with 5G in that construct, one is latency, right? And latency, I think we did a commercial. I know we did a commercial back in March, and I thought it was the best personification of latency we could do, right? Is if any of us have ever proposed or been proposed to, the time between the question and the answer is the personification of painful latency, right? Whether it took 2 seconds or 20 minutes, right? That time did not move, right? That's latency. The answer was binary, 0, 1 kilobytes, right? Yes or no, or I don't know, which is the worst answer you could possibly get, right?
Right.
In that construct. I didn't need more payload for that. I just needed a quicker response time so my stomach stopped turning, right? That's latency personified. That's one, right? The second one is jitter, right? And we talk about low latency, but I can achieve low latency in other types of network. It's the jitter that becomes the problematic or the enemy of a lot of these robotics and AR experiences, because if the AR or XR experience, augmented reality, isn't what it needs to be because of jitter, I'm gonna get car sick, right? And that's not a good experience either. So it's kind of, that's number one tenet, right? It's more than just speed. That's table stakes. We're going to get there with the physics of the spectrum and how we densify the network. Latency and reliability become next. The second tenet that I talk about and I try to focus on, this is why 5G is such a big topic, is convergence, right? The network is software. We talked about that earlier today, how that can be great and bad at the same time. But to get where we need to get to, the network and application have to be aware, or network and application have to be aware of one another, right? So they can make the right decision at the right time based on the right criteria built around it, right? So that's convergence. And that's not just going to be the operator, right? That's going to be us in partnerships with the cloud providers, with our customers, really getting to the third tenet, which is user defined, right? Because it's software, if I want to get to Goldilocks, I've got to understand what porridge is best for her, right? And that's the construct that we haven't had in cellular up until late LTE. And we started to see those changes take shape. And now if I can take those 3 tenets and start educating around those to define 5G, we get beyond this, how fast is it? We get to what's the balancing act between application and network. If I'm in a high bandwidth millimeter wave zone, I can ship you 4K video. Conversely, if I'm in that low bandwidth out in the rural location situation, you know what? I probably want to send you alphanumerics because I don't have the pipe to do it, right? So it's those kind of things. We've got to balance between network and application. And once we do that in context of our customers, it's going to be a lot of change that's going to happen. And you're starting to see that pick up now. But as that continues, that's going to be the scale. That's the nirvana of 5G. That's where it really takes off.
Yeah, so exciting, and just it's so much ahead and really not far away. I think that to me is what's so exciting. And, these experiences, these digital experiences that have become so commonplace are going to be even more fantastic with the advent of 5G and it becoming, just kind of our norm. So I want to talk just a minute about, data and security have been big concerns for 2020. Helen, what do you see on the horizon that will help businesses get a handle on perhaps managing data and keeping it more secure? Do you have any thoughts on that? I know you do.
I always have thoughts, as you know, Shelley.
I know you do.
So, and I work with a lot of companies and just to help them assess where they are at, right? Oftentimes, they don't necessarily even understand what their current state is, not knowing what are the endpoints, right? And one of the companies I work with, Fortune 300 companies, and they thought they had 300 endpoint connections, but it turns out it's 3 times more than what they thought they would have, right? So doing, for me, working with them to guide them on where to start is number one important things to really assess the landscape. What are the data, right? You need to protect it. You even have today, you're talking about the all the systems and then data, and then what are data that you have you can secure today versus the ones that for sure is secure, and then other data points that that's probably at risk. And then having that inventory list is a first step for them. That's what we guide them to ensure. And to me is also, I also learned about a lot of shadow ITs, right? The business oftentimes get off on their own to invest in systems IT leaders may not even be aware of. So for organizations to really have a holistic view of where exactly they are at with their data points, where are the potential risk or threat landscape, articulate that within their current state, that's the first thing that they got to work on to ensure secure environment.
Absolutely. You know, I see that our time is quickly drawing to an end, and I want to address one question that's in the chat. And you, our guest indicated that she's interested in cybersecurity skills, and can anyone give some pointers on how ordinary business pros can best upskill? And I will suggest, I don't have time to tackle that in great detail here, but I will suggest if you reach out to any one of us separately and connect with us on LinkedIn, certainly I will be able to help you and be happy to help you, point you in the direction of some online courses and some things like that. As I said, I preach this to my children all the time about, you know, the importance of cybersecurity and technical skills in general. So we don't really have time to go into great detail with that. But I want to just tell you all, thank you so much for hanging out today. It's always a pleasure to see all of you. And it's a great pleasure for me to see you all in one place and to have a discussion like this. And thanks so much to AT&T Business for making this happen, and to everyone who watched and engaged and shared. We really appreciate you. And we hope you'll come back again. This Biz Talks happens every month, I think. It's a recurring Twitter chat. So do look for it. Look for the hashtag, and join us next week. We're going to talk more about 2021 trends on Wednesday, December 9th at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. So you can get more of a fix of Biz Talks and all things technology and everything else. But Kevin, Jason, and Helen, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And with that, we're over and out for the day. Have a great rest of the day, everyone, and we'll see you again next time.